Hello everyone, Mr. Hart here again from a special guest location. That's right, the old classroom. Today I'm going to be reading Chapter 5, Beasts from the Water of Lord of the Flies. The tide was coming in, and there was only a narrow strip of firm beach between the water and the white, stumbling stuff near the palm terrace. Ralph chose the firm strip of a path because he needed to think, and only there could he allow his feet to move without having to watch them. Suddenly, pacing by the water, he was overcome with astonishment. He found himself understanding the wearisome of his life, where every path was an improvisation of considerable parts of one's walking life that was spent watching one's feet. He stopped, facing the strip, and remembered that first enthusiastic exploration, as though it was part of a brighter childhood. He smiled jeeringly. He turned, then walked back towards the platform with the sun in his face. The time had come for the assembly, and as he walked into the concealing splendors of the sunlight, he went carefully over the points of the speech. There must be no mistake about the assembly, no chasing imaginary. He lost himself in a maze of thoughts that were tendered, vague by his lack of words to express them. Frowning, he tried again. This meeting must not be fun, but business. And at that he walked faster, aware all of at once of the urgency, and then the declining sun and a little wind created by the speed that breathed about his face. This wind pressed his gray shirt against his chest so that he noticed, in his new mood of comprehension, how the folds were stiff like cardboard and unpleasant. Unnoticed, too, how the frayed edges of his shorts were making an uncomfortable pink area of the front of his thighs. And with a convulsion of the mind, Ralph discovered dirt and decay, and he understood how much he disliked perpetually flicking the tangled hair out of his eyes. And at last, when the sun was gone, rolling noisily over the rest of the dry leaves, and at that, he began to trot. The beach near the bathing pool was dotted with groups of boys waiting for the assembly. They made way for him silently, conscious of the grim mood from the fault at the fire. The place at the assembly in which he stood was roughly a triangle, but irregular and sketchy, like everything they made. First there was the log on which he himself sat, a dead tree that might have been quite exceptionally big except for the platform. Perhaps one of those legendary storms of the Pacific had shifted it here. This palm trunk lay parallel to the beach, so that when Ralph sat, he faced the island, but to the boys was a darkest figure against the shimmer of the lagoon. The two sides of the triangle, of which the log was base, were less evenly defined. On the right was a log polished by restless seats among the top, but not so large as the chief's and not so comfortable. On the left were four small logs, one of them, the farthest, lamentably springy. Assembly after assembly had broken up in laughter when someone had leaned too far back and the log had whipped and thrown half a dozen boys backward into the grass. Yet now he saw no one had the wit, not himself, nor Jack, nor Piggy, to bring a stone and wedge and thing. And so they would continue enduring the ill-balanced twister because, again, he lost himself in the deep waters. Grass was worn away in front of each trunk, but grew tall and untrodden in the center of the triangle. Then at the apex, the grass would stick again because no one sat there. All around the place of assembly, the great trunks rose, straight or leaning, and supported the low roof of leaves. On two sides of the beach, behind, the lagoon in front, the darkness of the island. Ralph turned to the chief's seat. They had never had an assembly as late as before. That was why the place looked so different. Normally, the underside of the green roof was lit by a tangle of golden reflections, and their faces were lit upside down. Thought Ralph, it was kind of like when you hold on electric torch in your hands. But now that sun was slanting in at the side, so that the shadows were where they ought to be. Again he fell into the strange mood of speculation that was so foreign to him. If faces were different when lit from above or below, what was a face? What was anything? Ralph moved impatiently. But the trouble was, if you were a chief, you had to think, you had to be wise. And then the occasion slipped by so that you had to grab a decision. This made you think, because thought was a valuable thing that got results. Only, decided Ralph as he faced the chief's seat, I can't think. Not like Piggy. Once more that evening, Ralph had to adjust his values. Piggy could think. He could think. He could go step by step inside that fat head of his. Only Piggy was not the chief. But Piggy, for all his ludicrous body, he had brains. Ralph was a specialist in thought now and could recognize thoughts in another. The sun was in his eyes. It reminded him how time was passing, so he took the conch down from the tree and examined the surface. Exposure to the air had bleached the yellow and pink to near white in transparency. Ralph felt a kind of affectionate reverence on the conch, even though it was fished. He had fished the thing out of the lagoon himself. He faced the place of the assembly and put the conch to his lips. The others were waiting for this, and they came right away. Those who were aware that the ship had passed the island while the fire was out were subdued by the thoughts of Ralph's anger, while those, including the lit ones, who did not know, were impressed by the general air of the solemnity. The place of assembly filled quickly. Jack, Simon, Maurice, most of the hunters, they were all on Ralph's right, and the rest were all under the sun. Piggy came and he stood outside the triangles. This indicated that he wished to listen and would not speak, and Piggy intended to give a gesture of disapproval. The thing is, we need an assembly. No one said anything, but all the faces turned to Ralph. At that moment, they were all intent. He flourished the conch. He had learned a practical business that fundamental statements like this had to be said at least twice before everyone understood them. One had to sit, attracting all eyes to the conch, and drop words like heavy, round stones among the little groups that crouched or squatted. He was searching his mind for simple words so even that the little ones could understand what the assembly was about. Later, perhaps, practiced debaters, Jack, Maurice, Piggy, would use this whole art to twist the meaning, but now at the beginning, the subject of the debate must be laid out clearly. We need an assembly, not one for fun, not one for laughing or falling off the log. The group of little ones on the twister giggled and looked up at each other. And not for making jokes or for... He lifted the conch in an effort to find the compelling words. This is not an assembly for cleverness. This is not to these things. But it's to put things straight. He paused for a moment. I've been alone by myself, I went, thinking what's what. I know what we need. We have to have an assembly to put things straight. And first of all, I am speaking, not you. He paused for a moment and automatically pushed back his hair. Piggy tiptoed to the triangle, his ineffectual protest made, and joined the others. And at that, Ralph went on. We have lots of assemblies. Everybody enjoys speaking and being together, and we decide things. But then those things don't get done. We were going to have water brought here from the stream and left in those coconut shells under those leaves. And so it was for a few days. But now there's no water. The shells are dry, and people are just drinking from the river. There was a murmur of assent. Not that that's anything wrong with drinking from the river. I mean, I'd sooner have water from that place, the pool where the waterfall is, than out of an old coconut shell. Only we said we'd have water brought to us. And now we don't. There were only 2 full shells this afternoon. At that, he licked his lips. And then there's the fact of these huts, our supposed shelters we were supposed to make. The murmur swelled again, and it died away. You mostly sleep in shelters. Tonight, except for of Seneric up by the fire, you'll all sleep there. But who is it here that built these shelters? Clamor rose at once. Everyone had built the shelters. Ralph had to wave the conch once more. Wait a minute. I mean, who built all 3? We all built the first one. 4 of us built the second one. And me and Simon alone were the only ones who built that last one over there. And that's why it's so tottery. No, don't you laugh. That shelter might fall down if rain even comes down. And at that moment, we're definitely going to need shelters if it starts raining, and you're not going to be laughing then. He paused and cleared his throat. There's another thing. We chose those rocks right along beyond that bathing pool as a lavatory. That was sensible too. The tide cleans the place up. And you little ones know about that. There were singers here and there with swift gazes. Now people seem to use anywhere. Even near the shelters and the platforms. You little ones, when you're getting fruit, if you've taken short, the assembly roared. I said if you've taken short, you keep away from the fruit. That's dirty. Laughter rose again. I said that's dirty. He plucked at his stiff gray shirt. That's really dirty. And if you've taken short, you will go along to the beach to the rocks. See? Piggy held out his hands on the conch, but Ralph shook his head. His speech was planned point by point, and he would not be interrupted. We've all got to use those rocks again. This place is getting dirty. The assembly, sensing a crisis, was tensely expectant. And then we must talk about the fire. Ralph let his spare breaths and little gasps that were echoed by the audience. Jack started to chip a piece of wood from his knife and whispered something to Robert, who looked away. The fire is the most important thing on the island. How can we ever be rescued except by luck if we don't keep a fire going? Is it a fire too much for us to make, for Pete's sakes? He flung out an arm. Look at us! How many are we? And yet we can't keep a fire going to make smoke? Come on, people! Don't you understand? Can't you see? We ought to die before we let that fire out going forward. There was a self-conscious giggling among the hunters, and Ralph turned on them passionately. You hunters! You're going to laugh at me now? Seriously? But I tell you, the smoke is more important than pig, however often you kill one. Do all of you see? He spread his arms wide and turned to the whole triangle. We've got to make smoke up there, or else we're going to die. He paused, feeling his next point. And another thing! Someone called out, There's too many things! There was a mutter of agreement, and Ralph overrode them. And another thing! We nearly set the whole island on fire, and we waste time rolling rocks and making little cooking fires. Now I say this, and I'm making a rule because I'm chief. We won't have a fire anywhere but on the mountain, ever again. There was a row immediately. Boys stood up and shouted, and Ralph shouted back at them. Because if you want a fire to cook fish or crab, you can jolly well go up that mountain. That way, we'll be certain there's always that fire going. Hands were reaching for the conch. In the light of the setting sun, he held on and he leapt off that trunk. All this I mean to say, and now I've said it. You voted me your chief. Now you will do what I say. They quieted slowly, and at last they were seated again, and Ralph dropped down and spoke in an ordinary voice. So remember, the rocks are for a laboratory, that's it. Keep the fire going and smoke showing as a signal. And don't take fire from the mountain. Take your food up there to the fire. Jack stood up, scowling in the gloom, and held out his hands. I haven't finished yet. Yeah, but you've talked and talked and talked. Yeah, but I've got the conch. Jack sat back down and he grumbled. And then one last thing. This is what people can talk about. He waited till the platform was ready. Things are breaking up and I don't understand why. We began well, we were all happy, and then... He moved to the conch gently, looking beyond them at nothing, remembering the beastie, the snake, the fire, the talk of fear. And then people started getting frightened. A murmur among the moan rose and passed away, and Jack had stopped whittling. Ralph went on abruptly. But all the little ones talk, and then they get straight. So that last part, the bit we can all talk about, is the kind of deciding where we're going to go with this fear. The hair at this point was creeping into his eye again. We've got to talk about the fear and decide there's nothing to it. I'm frightened myself sometimes, only that's all nonsense. It's like bogeys. Then when we've decided, we can all start again and be careful about things like the fire. A picture of three boys walking along the bright beach flitted through his mind. And we can all be happy again. Ceremonially, Ralph laid the conch on the trunk beside him and a sign that his speech was over. What sunlight reached them was level. At that moment, Jack stood up and he took the conch. So this is a meeting to find out what's what. Well, I'm going to tell you what's what, Jack said. You little ones started all this with your fear talk. Beast! From where? Of course, we're all frightened sometimes, but we put up for being frightened. Only Ralph says you scream in the night. What does that mean but nightmares? Anyway, you don't hunt and you don't build or help at all. You're like a bunch of crybabies and sissies. That's what. And as for fear, you'll have to put up with that like the rest of us. Ralph looked at Jack, open-mouthed, but Jack took no notice. The thing is, fear can't hurt you any more than a dream. There aren't any beasts to be afraid of on this island. He looked around the row of whispering little ones. Serves you right if something did get you, you useless lot of crybabies. But there is no animal here to get you. Ralph interrupted him testily. Who is all this? Who said anything about any type of animal anyway? You did the other day. You said to dream and cry out. Now they talk. Not only the little ones, but the hunters sometimes. They talk of things, a dark thing, a beast, some sort of animal. I've heard. You thought not, didn't you? Now listen. You don't get big animals on small islands, only pigs. You only get lions and tigers in big countries like Africa and India. And in the zoo. I've got the conch. I'm not talking about the fear. I'm talking about the beast. Be frightened if you like, but as for this beast... Jack paused, cradling the conch, and turned to the hunters with a dirty black caps. Am I a hunter, or am I not a hunter? They nodded simply. He was a hunter, all right. No one doubted that. Well, then, I've been all over this island by myself. And if there were a beast, I would have seen it. I'd be frightened because you're like that. You can be frightened because you're like that, but there is no beast on this island. I will tell you right now. Jack handed back the conch and sat down. The whole assembly applauded with him in relief. And then Piggy held out his hand. I don't agree with all Jack said, but with some of it, of course there isn't a beast in the forest. How could there be? What would a beast eat? He could eat Piggy. Yeah, we eat pig. Piggy! I got the conch. Ralph, they ought to shut up, hadn't they? You shut up, you little ones. What I mean is that I don't agree with this here fear. Of course there isn't nothing to be afraid of in the forest. Why? I've been there myself. You'll all be talking about ghosts and such things like that. We know that what goes on. We know what goes on, and if there's something wrong, there's something to put in it right. He took off his glasses and he blinked at them. The sun had gone as if the light had been turned off, and he proceeded to explain. If there's a pain in your stomach, whether it's a little one or a big one, yeah, your pain in your stomach's a big one. When you're done laughing, perhaps you'll get on with the meeting. And if those little ones climb down off the twister again, they're only going to fall off in a sec. So they might as well sit down on the ground and listen. No, you have doctors for everything, even the inside of your mind. You don't really mean that we got to be frightened all the time for nothing, said Piggy expansively. It's scientific, that's what it is. In a year or two, when this war's over, they'll be traveling to Mars and back. I know there isn't no beast, not with claws and all that, but I do know that there isn't no fear either. Piggy paused. Unless, Ralph moves restlessly. Unless what? Unless we get frightened of the people here. A sound, a half laugh, half jeer, rose from the seated boys. Piggy ducked his head and went on hastily. So let's hear from those little ones who talked about a beast, and perhaps we can show him how silly he is. The little ones began to jabber among themselves, and then one stood forward. What's your name? Phil! For a little one, he was self-confident, holding out his hands, cradling the conch as Ralph did, looking around for them to collect their attention before he spoke. Last night I had a dream, a horrid dream, fighting with things. I was outside the shelter by myself, fighting things, and then these twisty things got up in the trees. He paused, and the other little ones laughed in a horrific symphony. Then I was frightened, I woke up, and as I was outside the shelter by myself in the dark, and the twisty things had gone away. The vivid horror of this, so possible and so nakedly terrifying, held me all silent. The child's voice was now piping on from beyond the white conch. And I was frightened and staring to call out for Ralph, and then I saw something among the trees, something big and horrid. That was a nightmare, said Ralph. He was walking in his sleep. The assembly murmured in subdued agreement. The little one shook his head stubbornly. I was asleep when the Swissy things were fighting, and then they went away. I was awake, and I saw something big and horrid moving in the trees. Ralph held out his hands for the conch, and the little one sat down. You were asleep. There wasn't anything there. How would anything be wandering about the forest at night? Did anyone go out? There was a long pause while the assembly grinned at that and anyone going out in the darkness. And then Simon stood up and Ralph looked at him with astonishment. You! What were you mucking up about in the dark for? Simon grabbed the conch convulsively. I wanted to go to a place I know. What place? Just a place I know, a place in the jungle. He hesitated. Jack settled the question for them that the contempt in his voice would sound so funny and so final. He was taken short. With a feeling of humiliation on Simon's behalf, Ralph took back the conch, looking Simon sternly in the face as he did so. Well, don't you do it again, understand? Not at night, at least. There's enough silly talk about beasts without the little one seeing you gliding around like a... The derisive laughter that Rose had feared in it and condemnation. Simon opened his mouth to speak, but Ralph had the conch, so he went back to his seat. When the assembly was silent, Ralph turned to Piggy. Well, Piggy, there was another one, him. The little ones pushed Percival forward and then left him go by himself. He stood knee-deep in the central grass, looking at his hidden feet, trying to pretend that he was a tent. Ralph remembered another small boy who had stood like this, and he flinched away from the memory. He had punched the thought down on one side where only some positive reminder like they could bring into the surface. There had been no further numberings of the little ones, partly because there was no means of ensuring that all of them were accounted for, and partly because Ralph knew the answer at least to one question Piggy had asked on the mountaintop. They were little boys, fair, dark, freckled, and all dirty, but their faces were all dreadfully free of major blemishes. No one had seen the mulberry-colored birthmark again. No one had seen that little boy from the first day. But that time, Piggy had coaxed and bullied, tacitly admitting that he remembered the unmentionable. And at that moment, Ralph nodded to Piggy. Go on then, ask him. Piggy now told him the conch. Now then, what's your name? The small boy twisted away the tent, and Piggy turned helplessly to Ralph, who spoke sharply. What's your name? Tormented by the silence and the refusal of the assembly, everybody broke into a chant. What's your name? What's your name? Quiet, quiet! Ralph peered into the child with the twilight. Now tell us, what's your name? Percival Wymus Madison, the Viceroy's Harcourt Street. Anthony Hans, telephone. As if this information was rooted down far in the springs of sorrow, the little one wept. His face puckered, the tears leaped from his eyes, his mouth opened till they could see a square hole black. At first he was silent, effigy of sorrow, but then the lamentation rose out of him, loud and sustained on the conch. Shut up, you! Shut up! Percival Wemya Madison would not shut up. A spring had been trapped far beyond the reach of authority of even physical intimidation. The crying went on, breathed out, and seemed to sustain him right into as if it were to nail him there. Shut up! Shut up! For now the little ones were no longer silent. They were reminded of their personal sorrows, and perhaps they themselves to share a sorrow with the universe. They began to cry in sympathy, two of them almost as loud as Percival. But Maurice saved them. He cried out, Look at me! He pretended to fall over. He rubbed his rump and sat on the twister so that he fell off the grass. And he clowned badly, but Percival and all the others noticed and sniffed and laughed. Presently, they were all laughing so absurdly that the big ones all joined in too. Jack was the first one to make himself heard. He had not got the conch and thus spoke against the rules, but nobody minded. And what about the beast? Something strange was happening to Percival. He yawned and staggered so that Jack seized and shook him. Where does the beast live? Percival sagged in Jack's grip. That's a clever beast, said Piggy, jeering. If it can hide on this island. Jack's been everywhere. Yeah, where could a beast live? Beast my foot. Percival muttered something, and the assembly laughed again, and Ralph leaned forward. What did he just say? Jack listened to Percival's answer, and then he let go of him. Percival, released, surrounded by the uncomfortable pressure of the humans, fell on the long grass and went to sleep. Jack cleared his throat and reported casually, He says the beast comes out from the sea. The last laugh died away, and Ralph turned involuntarily, a black, humped figure against the lagoon. The assembly looked with him, considered the vast stretches of water, the high sea beyond, unknown indigo of the infinite possibilities, and heard silently the sough and whisper from the reef. Maurice spoke so loudly that they jumped. Daddy said that they haven't found all the animals in the sea yet! Argument started again. Ralph held out the glimmering conch, and Maurice took it obediently. The meeting subsided. I mean, when Jack says that you can be frightened because people are frightened anyways, that's right. But when he says that there's only pigs on this island, I expect he might be, but he doesn't know. Not really, not for certain, I mean. Maurice took a breath. My daddy says there's things, what'd you call them, that, like ink squids, like 100 yards long, they can eat a whole whale. He paused again and laughed gaily. I don't believe in the beast, of course. As Piggy says, life's scientific, but we don't know, do we? Not certainly, I mean. Someone shouted, a squid shouldn't come up out of the water. It could not. In a moment, the platform was full, arguing, gesticulating shadows. To Ralph, seated, this seemed to be the breaking up of sanity. Fear, beast, no general agreement that the fire was all important, and when all one tried to do was get the thing straight, the argument sheared off, bringing up fresh, unpleasant matter. He could see a whiteness in the gloom here to him, so he grabbed it from Maurice and blew as loudly as he could. Dun, dun, dun! The assembly was shocked into silence. Simon was close to him, laying hands on the conch. Simon felt a perilous necessity to speak, but to speak in assembly was a terrible thing to him. Maybe there is a beast. The assembly cried out savagely, and Ralph stood up in amazement. You, Simon, you believe in this beast? I don't know, said Simon. His heartbeats were choking him, but the storm broke. Sit down! Shut up! Take the conch! Saw it, you! Hey, shut up! Ralph shouted, hear him! He's got the conch! What I mean is, maybe it's only us. That's nuts! That was from Piggy, shocked out of decorum. Simon went on. We could all Simon became inarticulate in his effort to express mankind's essential illness. Inspiration, though, came to him. What's the dirtiest thing there is? As an answer, Jack dropped into the comprehending silence and followed in one crude, expressive syllable. Release was immense. Those little ones who had climbed back on the twister fell off again and did not mind. The hunters were screaming with delight. Simon's effort fell from him in ruins. The laughter beat him cruelly, and then he shrank defenselessly to the seat. At last, the assembly was silent again, and someone spoke out of turn. Maybe he means it's some sort of ghost. Ralph lifted the conch and peered into the gloom. The lightest thing of the pale beach. Surely the little ones were nearer. Yes, there was no doubt about it. There was huddled up into a tight knot of bodies in the central grass. There was a flurry of wind made from the palm talk, and the noise seemed very loud now, and the darkness and silence made it so noticeable. Two great trunks rubbed each other with an evil speaking that no one noticed by day. Piggy took the conch out of his hands, and his voice was indignant. I don't want to believe in no ghosts ever! Jack was up too, unaccountably angry. Who cares what you believe, fatty? I got the conch! There was the sound of a brief tussle, and the conch moved to and fro. You give me that conch back! Ralph pushed between them and got a thump on his chest. He wrestled the conch from someone and sat down breathlessly. There's too much talk about ghosts. We ought to have left for all this for daylight. A hushed and anonymous voice broke out. Perhaps that's what the beast is. A ghost. The assembly was shaken by a wind. There's too much talking out of turn because we can't have proper assemblies if you don't stick to the rules. He stopped again. The careful plan of assembly had broken down. What do you want me to say then? I was wrong to call this assembly so late? We've all had a vote on them, on ghosts I mean, and then we go to the shelters because we're all tired? No, Jack isn't. Wait a minute. I say here and now that I don't believe in ghosts, or I don't think I do, but I don't like the thoughts of them. Not now it is, in the dark at least. I don't want to think about ghosts right now. But we were going to decide what's what. He raised the conch for a moment. Very well then. I suppose that is we should decide whether there are ghosts or not. He thought for a moment, formulating the question. Who thinks there may be ghosts here? Show of hands. For a long time there was silence and no apparent movement. Then Ralph peered into the gloom and made out his hand. He spoke flatly. I see. The world, that understandable and lawful world, was slipping away. Once there was this and that, and now that ship had gone. The conch was snatched from his hand, and Piggy's voice shrilled. I didn't vote for no ghost. He rolled around at the assembly. Remember that, all of you. They heard him stamp. What are we? Homera or animals or savages? What are the grown-ups gonna think? We're going off, hunting pigs, letting fires out, and now a shadow fronted tempestuously. Shut up, you fat slug. There was a moment's struggle, and the glimmering conch jiggled up and down, and Ralph leapt to his feet. Jack! You haven't got the conch. Let him speak. Jack's face swam near him. And you shut up. Who do you think you are anyway, sitting there telling people what to do? You can't hunt. You can't sing. I'm chief. I was chosen. Why do you think choosing makes you any different? Just giving orders, that don't make any sense. Piggy has the conch right now. That's right. Favor Piggy as you always do. Jack! Jack's voice sounded in a bitter mimicry. Jack! The rules state, and you're breaking the rules. Who cares about the rules? Ralph summoned his wits. Because the rules are the only thing that we got. But Jack was shouting against himself. Bollocks to the rules! We're strong. We hunt. There are beasts. If there are beasts, we're going to hunt them down right now. We'll close in and we're going to beat them and beat them and beat them. He gave a wild whoop and leaped down off the pale sand. And at once the platform was full of noise and excitement. Scrambling, screams, laughter. The assembly shredded away and became a discursive and random scatter from palms in the water and away from the beach beyond the night sight. Ralph found his check touching the conch and took it away from Piggy. What are grown-ups going to say? Look at him, Piggy asked and cried again. The sound of mock hunting, hysterical laughter, and real terror came from the beach. Blow the conch again, Ralph! Piggy was so close that Ralph could see the glint of one glass. There's the fire, can't they see? You gotta be tough now, make them do what you want. Ralph answered in a cautious voice of one who rehearsed a theorem. If I blow the conch and they don't come back, then we've had it. We shan't keep that fire going, and we'll all be like animals. We will never be rescued. But if you don't blow it, we'll soon be animals anyway. I can't see what they're doing, but I can hear them, and they're going crazy down there. The disturbed figures had come together back on the sand and were a dense black mass that revolved. They were chanting something, and the little ones that had enough were staggering away howling. Ralph raised the conch to his lips and lowered it. The trouble is, are they ghosts, Piggy, or are they beasts? Of course they aren't either. Why not? Because things don't make sense. House and streets and TV, they wouldn't work. The dancing, chanting boys had worked themselves away from the sound as if it was nothing but wordless rhythm. But suppose they don't make any sense, not here or on this island. Suppose things are watching us and waiting for us. Ralph shuddered violently and moved towards Piggy so that they bumped frighteningly. You stop talking like that. We got enough trouble, Ralph, as much as I've had as I can stand. If there's a ghost, I ought to give up being chief. Do you hear them? Oh, Lord, oh no, you can't do that, Ralph. Piggy gripped Ralph's arm. If Jack was chief, he'd have us all hunting and no. If Jack was chief, he'd have us all hunting and there'd be no fire. We'd be all here. We'd all still be here until we died. We'd never get off this island. His voice ran up into a squeak. Who's that sitting there? Me, Simon. Fat lot of good we are, said Ralph. We're 3 blind mice. You know what? I just give up. If you give up, said Piggy in an appalled whisper, what's going to happen to me? Nothing. He hates me. I don't know why. If he could do what he wanted. Oh, you're all right. He respects you. Besides, you'd hit him if he tried to hit me. You know what? You were the one having a nice fight with him just now. I had the conch. I had a right to speak, not him. Simon stirred in the dark. Go on being chief. We need you. You shut up, young Simon. Why couldn't you say that there wasn't a beast? I'm scared of him, said Piggy. And that's why I know him. If you're scared of someone you hate, but you can't stop thinking about him, you kid yourself. He's all right, really. And then you see him again, it's like asthma and you can't breathe. I tell you that. He hates you too, Ralph. Me? Why would he hate me? I don't know. You got him over that fire and you're chief and he isn't. But he's Jack Merridew. He doesn't have to be intimidated by me. I've been in bed so much, I've done some thinking. I know about people. I know about me and him. He can't hurt you, but if you stand out of the way, he'll hurt the next thing, and that's me. As soon as you're not chief, I'm done. Piggy's right, Ralph. There's you and there's Jack. You got to be chief over him. You can't step down, Simon said. We're all drifting, and things have gotten rotten. At home, there's always a grown-up. Please, sir, please, miss. And then you got an answer. How I wish. Oh, I wish my auntie were here. I wish my father, or what's the use? Keep the fire going. The dance was over, and the hunters were going back to their shelters. Grown-ups know things, Piggy said. They're afraid of the dark, and they meet and have tea and discuss. And then things would be all right if the grown-ups were here. Yeah, and they wouldn't have set fire to the island or lose. Yeah, they could have built a ship by now if we had grown-ups here. The 3 boys stood in the dark, striving unsuccessfully to convey the majesty of adult life. There wouldn't be quarrel, or break, or no one would have broken my specs. Or there wouldn't be talk of a beast. Yeah, if only they could get a message to us, cried Ralph desperately. If only they could send us something grown-up, a sign of something. A thin wall of the darkness chilled them and set them grabbing for each other. And then the wail rose, remote and unearthly, and returned to the inarticulate, gibbering Percival Wamless Madison of the Viceroy. Harcourt's St. Anthony lying in the long grass. He was living through circumstances in which the incantation of the address was powerful or powerless to help him. All right, guys, that is the end of chapter 6. Definitely a lot of fighting's taking place amongst these boys now. I want you guys to think, even amongst your friends, how long would you be able to last until a fight like this would happen? I also want you to think, if you lived in such a world like this, even if it was just your friends, would you have set rules that you would want to set up? Do you think that would be important? Or do you think rules are dumb? Do you think you can live on without? I'm going to be asking you guys this in the questions very shortly here. But I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed this classroom edition of Chapter 5. Take care, everybody.